welcome to the Motocross Vault. My name is Tony Blazier, and what this video is going to cover is a look back at the 125 contenders in 1989 and how they stacked up in the motocross press of the time. In this case, that's going to cover 4 magazines: Dirt Bike, Motocross Action, Dirt Rider, and Super Motocross. Now, Super Motocross, unfortunately, would be out of production pretty much maybe a couple of months after this Shootout comes out. This was a magazine that was kind of an offshoot of Dirt Rider, focused mainly on motocross only. It was a great magazine, one of my favorite magazines at the time, but unfortunately, it was, I guess, kind of a niche product, and that eventually it would get folded back into Dirt Rider here about a couple months after this comes out. But this is going to be a comparison where they looked at how these different machines stacked up in 1989. It's interesting to think now that there was a great deal of kind of disagreement on who had the best 125 this year. I would say most people probably think the Honda would have won going away, but actually, if you look back at the magazines, it didn't win every shootout that year. I have a pretty good feel of these machines. I've ridden all of them. I owned an '89 YZ125. 2 of my friends had some of the other competitors here. One of them had the KX125. The other one had the RM. And I actually love the RM. I thought that was a really, really great machine. I owned a 1990 CR125, which is a very similar machine, but I have ridden the '89. They're all great bikes. They all had very different personalities. Like I said, it's in the '80s, motorcycles are very different. They're not like they are now, where there's kind of a homogenous thing where, yeah, there's obviously differences, but the differences are more drastic. That one bike ran completely differently than another, particularly in the 2-stroke days where it was hard to get those wide power bands like you see on a 4-stroke. So you kind of had to tune it for low end or mid range. You had to make these different choices on how you wanted the machines to run, and that really changed the personality of the bikes. And there was a wide variety in terms of handling and suspension and stuff. It was an interesting era for motocross. So this is going to look back at how each machine performed at the time and how the magazines rated them. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you check out some of the other videos I have on the channel. I have several other shootout videos and several videos focused on motocross, off-road, and ATV. I also have Motocross Vault merch available if you'd like to support what I do. They are available in my Teespring store. I have kind of designs based on all the major manufacturers. And if you have something custom you'd like me to do, let me know. I can put your bike in the back of a truck, put your name and number on the back of a shirt, kind of anything you want there. Just hit me up in the comments or drop me a line on Gmail or my Twitter. My Twitter handle is @TonyBlazier, and if you want to hit me up on Gmail, it's themotocrossvault@gmail.com. So here, without further ado, is a look back at the shootouts for the 125 class in 1989. The 1989 season was a great time to be racing in the 125 class. This season, all the big 4 Japanese tiddlers received substantial upgrades, with Yamaha, Suzuki, and Honda introducing all new machines. Revamped in 1988, the KX125 did not receive the same glam up for 1989, but it did receive significant chassis upgrades and a beefy new set of work-style forks for the front end. Over in Europe, KTM's 125 added motor and suspension upgrades aimed at making it a mainstream contender against the dominant Japanese. All 5 machines were remarkably competitive, and unlike most other seasons, there was not a real dog in the bunch. For this shootout rundown, we are going to look back at the surprisingly varied opinions the magazines had of the contenders in 1989. Today, I think most people would assume that Honda swept these comparisons, but it is interesting to see how much varied opinion there was back in 1989. All 4 Japanese machines had their champions, with Motocross Action, Dirt Bike, and Dirt Rider coming to very different conclusions. In 1989, only Dirt Bike included the KTM in their shootout, so only their rankings will be reflected in the final standings. As before, I will include a brief summary of each machine's final shootout standings and provide a bit of additional information on each bike for context. First up, we have the 1989 Honda CR125R. In this year's shootouts, Motocross Action ranked it 1st out of 4, Dirt Bike ranked it 3rd out of 5, Dirt Rider ranked it 3rd out of 4, and Super Motocross ranked it 1st out of 4. All new for 1989, Honda CR125 adopted the sleek and sexy lowboy layout introduced on the CR250 the year before. This new bodywork lowered the machine's center of gravity and provided the CR with the slimmest and most comfortable ergonomics in the class. Engine changes for '89 included beefed up gears, new timing for the ATAC, larger bearings for the connecting rod, improved piston lubrication, an enlarged reed valve, new porting, and a reshaped exhaust. Chassis upgrades included an all-new frame with slightly more rake and increased strength in critical areas. An all-new rear suspension system moved to the CR250's Delta Box linkage, introduced in 1988, to provide improved performance on hard hits, and this was paired with a revamped Kayaba rear damper. Up front, the CR eschewed the trend towards beefier forks by sticking with the same 43mm Showa conventional cartridge units it had employed since 1987. Initially a huge Honda advantage, these forks were quickly becoming a liability as larger 46mm conventional and inverted designs with greater external adjustability were becoming the class norm. On the track, the 89 CR125R was defined by one thing: power. The motor changes for 1989 brought back the boost missing the previous year and pleased riders who had been perplexed by the 88 CR125's mellower delivery. There was not much grunt down low, but once the Honda lit the fuse, it was rooster tails and white knuckles as the Red Ripper pulled you to the front. From the mid-range to the rev limiter, none of the other Japanese machines were as fast as Honda's CR125. Novices sometimes struggle with its peaky power and potent delivery, but no one felt the CR was anything but a winner in the motor department. Riders also loved the Honda's new layout and comfy feel. The redesigned seat was taller in the middle and lower in the back, making it easier than ever to climb around the machine in the heat of battle. Excellent brakes, effortless shifting, and a bulletproof clutch also made the Honda's list of significant advantages. Turning remained a CR strong suit, with the red machine carving tight arcs with ease. Headshake under deceleration, also a notorious Honda trademark, was ever present, but most riders felt it was a fair trade-off for the CR's nimble manners in the turns. Where things went pear-shaped for the Honda was in the suspension department. The 43mm forks that dominated racing in 1987 were noticeably flexy on hard hits and less accurate feeling than the larger 46mm conventional and inverted units found in the competition. The stock spring rates were well sorted, but the damping settings Honda chose caused the forks to skitter and deflect on small chop and holes. The forks delivered a harsh spike in the mid-stroke, and most riders rated them as the worst of the Japanese contenders. In the rear, the picture was only slightly better, with the all-new ProLink delivering a harsh ride that only smoothed out when pushed. Riding the CR like Mike Kudrowski delivered acceptable results, but everyone below his speed found the damper harsh and busy. Braking bumps and small chop flummoxed its damping, and the CR was only happy when in full attack mode. For Sky Cooper and the MX Kid, this was ideal, but for average Joes, its stock performance was disappointing. In the end, the CR's incredible power, sharp turning, and feathery feel were enough to cause motocross action and super motocross to overlook its other shortcomings. The CR was by far the best bike for pros who loved its endless pull and weren't concerned with its lack of suspension compliance. At dirt bike and dirt rider, the Honda's demanding power band and harsh suspension were enough to knock it out of the top spot against its easier-to-ride rivals. Up next is the 1989 Suzuki RM125. This year, the RM finished third out of 4 contenders in Motocross Action Shootout. Dirt bike ranked it second in a tie with the YZ out of 5. Dirt rider ranked it first out of 4, and Super Motocross ranked it second out of 4. Another all-new machine in 1989, Suzuki's revamped RM125 was a serious return to glory for the beleaguered brand. After dominating 125 racing in the late 70s and early 80s, Suzuki hit hard times with a run of lackluster offerings in the mid-80s. Quirky styling, flighty power bands, and poor quality construction put the once-winning brand on the ropes during this era. In 1989, however, Suzuki came roaring back with an all-new design that had been developed with the help of 6-time AMA champion Bob Hanna. Bob had been hired in 1986 to help turn around Suzuki's flagging race development team, and the 89 RMs marked the first all-new machines to bear the Hurricane stamp of approval. Redesigned from the ground up, the 89 RM125 featured a revamped frame, redesigned power plant, beefed-up suspension, and cutting-edge styling. The new bodywork did away with the old oddball shapes and wide panel gaps of previous RMs and replaced them with a sleek and modern design that was as beautiful and up-to-date as anything in the class. The new chassis was just as thoroughly modern, with a fully boxed swing arm pivot, a removable alloy bar for shock access, and much stronger construction. An all-new Kiaba fork was introduced that increased the diameter of the stanchions from 43 to 46 millimeters for improved flex resistance. As before, the new forks offered a full range of external adjustments for compression and rebound damping. In the rear, a redesigned full floater replaced the steel linkage of an 88 with all new alloy components to save weight and added a redesigned Kiaba shock and revamped swing arm. The new swing arm finally moved to a push-style mechanism for easier and more reliable chain adjustment as well. The revamped motor moved to a case redesign for 89 to allow for a straighter and shorter intake track and added 0.5 millimeters to the motor's overall stroke. An all-new cylinder featured revised porting and continued to use Suzuki's automatic exhaust timing control power valve to vary exhaust port height using a pair of sliding guillotine valves. Carburation duties remain the task of Mikuni's 35mm crescent slide slingshot carburetor with an all-new semi-lowboy pipe and large alloy silencer finishing off the motor package. All the RM's controls in 89 were upgraded to improve comfort by redesigning the grips, reshaping the levers, and reducing the drag within the cables. All new brakes increased stopping power by increasing the diameter of the disc by 10 mm, enlarging the pads, and moving to a grippier pad material. Bolt and fastener selection for 89 was much improved, with the RM finally moving to a more uniform selection of sizes and designs. This made maintenance much easier than in the past, with the RM finally feeling as if it was designed by one cohesive team instead of a bunch of committees that never met each other. On the track, the new RM proved to be a hugely upgraded machine. Riders loved the new layout, super slick controls, and snappy power. Unlike the 88 RM, which was a mid and up screamer, the new bike barked out of the hole and pulled super hard into a strong mid-range. This made the RM a great fit for less experienced riders who loved its excellent torque and immediate response. Top-end power, however, was unimpressive, and the new bike ran out of steam just as the 88 RM was getting started. Once past its abrupt low to mid-hit, the 89 RM had very little power on tap. Revving the yellow machine only made it go slower, and it was far more effective to grab another gear than try and play rev limit roulette like the CR125R. While the new RM was impressively quick from corner to corner, its lack of top-end pull put it at a disadvantage if the track was fast and the straights were long. It was far easier to keep on the pipe than the Honda, but skilled riders often found its short and punchy power band frustrating. It required twice the shifts per lap compared to the Honda, but its clutch was super light and its transmission was buttery smooth. If you kept the shifts coming, then the RM was competitively fast, but if you needed to wring it out to the next corner or missed a shift, then the Honda was likely to eat you up. On the chassis front, the RM was immensely improved. The new frame was far stronger than in the past, and that imparted a solid feel that made the Suzuki a joy to ride, jump, and race. The new Zook offered the sharpest handling in the class, with excellent turning that could carve arcs around even standout turners like the CR125. At speed, the RM was quite unsettled, however, and the bike was busy and slightly disconcerting at first. Unlike the Honda, it rarely broke out into headshake, and most riders got used to its loosey-goosey feel at speed after a bit of saddle time. As in the past, the suspension remained an RM strong suit, with the new fork and shock providing some of the best performance in the class. The 46mm KYB forks were noticeably stouter than the 43mm units found on the Honda, and they provided an excellent feel on the track. Big hits were taken well, and most riders thought they were second only to the ultra-plush Kawasaki forks in performance. In the rear, the new full floater proved just as adept at taming the track, with a plush feel and excellent overall control. Johnny O'Mara types felt it was a bit soft for major aerial work, but for most riders below the Pro class, it was an excellent stock suspension package. In the final standings, it was the RM's lack of top end that hurt it the most in the magazine rankings. Dirt Rider felt its punchy delivery, razor-sharp turning, excellent suspension, and flickable feel outweighed this deficiency, but all the other magazines felt it was too big of a handicap to overlook. On looks alone, the RM could have won, and it easily ranked as the most improved machine of the year. For less experienced riders, it was an excellent choice, but for expert-level 125 racing, its lack of fire-breathing horsepower was just too hard to ignore. Now for the 1989 Kawasaki KX125. This year, Motocross Action ranked it 4th out of 4, Dirt Bike ranked it 1st out of 5, Dirt Rider had it come in at 3rd out of 4, and Super Motocross ranked it 3rd out of 4. In 1989, no other 125 proved as polarizing as Kawasaki's KX125. Every magazine except Dirt Bike picked it as 3rd or 4th, while Super Hunky, Eddie Arnett, and Torque and Tim picked it 1st. Perhaps this was due to their off-road roots, where stability and suspension comfort were often valued over outright power. Here, the 89 KX125 excelled, with the best overall suspension package and the most well-rounded handling in the class. Its new 46mm conventional forks were copies of the Works forks run by Jeff Ward and Ron Lachine in '88, and they were excellent in every regard. Fast guys loved their flex-free feel and superb control, while mere mortals gushed about their plush action. In the rear, the KX125's Unitrack gobbled up the track and floated over bumps and holes that thudded the backsides of pilots on the Honda. Big hits and small were taken in stride, and the Kawasaki could be pinned through sections that had riders on the other machines puckering up and saying a Hail Mary. The Kawasaki's handling was equally praised for its do-it-all versatility and confidence-inspiring feel. Geometry updates for 89 improved the turning by steepening the steering angle, and the new 19-inch rear wheel improved tracking and traction out of turns. The new larger forks further improved steering precision, with the 89 KX125 providing notably more accuracy than in the past. Compared to machines like the twitchy RM, the KX was rather slow handling, but very few riders complained about its turning, which was something that could not be said of previous KX125s. At speed, the Kawasaki was rock solid and far less anxiety-inducing than the Honda, Suzuki, and KTM. It never shook its head, swapped suddenly, or did anything weird. It just went where it was pointed, whether on the ground or in the air. For the KX, most of its criticism centered around its bulky bodywork and uninspiring motor. All new in 1988, the KX's bodywork and layout were larger and roomier than its competitors. This was great for big guys, but most 125-size pilots found it gave it a heftier feel than its 198 pounds deserved. Aesthetically, the KX's bodywork also did it no favors, but its old-school single radiator and gargantuan rear fender did not affect performance. On the motor front, porting and power valve changes for 89 looked to broaden the 88 KX's punchy mid-range delivery, but most people felt the new motor was a step backward from the year before. The new power band was super smooth and wide, but there was absolutely no hit or burst anywhere on the curve. At its peak, it gave up nearly 2 horsepower to the Honda and was even outmuscled by the rather asthmatic RM. It was easy to keep on the pipe, and novices liked its broad delivery, but even they thought the bike needed a bit more excitement in its power band. On the track, the KX remained competitive despite its mellow delivery. The sure handling, excellent suspension, and electric power band made it easy to go fast and less tiring than some of the more dramatic machines in the class. It hooked up well out of corners and allowed you to charge the turns and maintain momentum in the rough. Skilled riders could go very fast on the KX, but most of them found it less entertaining to ride than the zestier Honda and Suzuki. For motocross action, super motocross, and dirt rider, this lack of verve was enough to knock the competent but slightly boring KX to the back of the standings. At dirt bike, the Kawasaki's virtues seemed to find more champions, and they ranked the KX at the top of the class, despite the motor's milquetoast personality. Next up, we have the last of the Japanese contenders, in the form of the 1989 Yamaha YZ125. This year, motocross action ranked it second out of 4, dirt bike ranked it second in a tie with the RM out of 5, dirt rider ranked it 4th out of 4, and super motocross ranked it 4th out of 4. Another all-new machine, the YZ125 was an acquired taste in 1989. If you gelled with its unique handling and power characteristics, then it was a winner, but if you had difficulty keeping it at full boil, then it was a frustrating bike to ride. In 1988, the YZ125 had been similarly polarizing, with its unique power band that came on hard in the mid-range but turned over very quickly. When it was on the pipe, it was wicked fast, but that burst was short-lived and tricky to use in the heat of battle. For 1989, Yamaha looked to broaden the YZ's power spread by reshaping the profile of its power valve, revising the porting, flattening the dome of the piston, increasing the stroke, streamlining the intake track, and moving to Nickel for the cylinder liner. A 1mm larger carburetor was added and paired with an all-new exhaust and freer breathing airbox. A redesigned clutch aimed to improve the old unit's grabby action, and a redesigned transmission altered the primary gear ratio to improve shifting action and revised the ratios to optimize performance. In addition to the extensive motor changes, the YZ125 adopted an all-new look for 1989. Originally debuted on the YZ250 in 1988, the 125's new YZM-inspired bodywork lowered the radiators and fuel cell to better centralize mass and improve rider comfort. The new layout was lower and longer, with a flatter seat and repositioned bars and pegs. An all-new frame underpinned the YZ, featuring revised geometry and a much greater strength by using a rectangular down tube and fully boxed swing arm pivot. On the suspension front, Yamaha became the first Japanese manufacturer to go inverted in the 125 class, with the addition of Kiawa's all-new 41mm inverted cartridge fork. Yamaha claimed the inverted design was superior to the old 43mm conventional forks due to its larger diameter clamping area and an additional 30% of internal overlap, which produced much less flex under a load. In addition, the inverted design also reduced the chance of catching the forks in a rut due to its reduced underhang below the axle. In the rear, the YZ featured a redesigned monocross linkage with a more progressive leverage ratio and a beefed-up swing arm. The shock duties were handled by Kiawa, with a full range of adjustments for compression and rebound damping. As with Kawasaki, Yamaha decided to move to a larger 19-inch rear wheel for 1989 to provide improved feel and increased traction on hard surfaces. On the track, the YZ was much improved over the 88 machine. The new layout was comfy and easy to move around on, but some taller riders found the relationship of the bars, seat, and pegs to be a bit cramped. The YZ's handling was improved as well, but most riders felt it was the least precise of the 4 Japanese machines. In soft terrain, it would occasionally tuck the front end, and on hardpack, it was prone to a push. It was generally a very stable machine at speed, but some riders reported a very un-Yamaha-like headshake under deceleration. None of the 89 125s were terrible handlers, but most riders seemed to agree that the Yamaha was the most unpredictable handling of the big 4 in 1989. On the motor front, the Yamaha continued to be a rocket in the mid-range, but there was not a lot of excitement above or below this pop in the middle. It was a bit less torquey down low and pulled a bit farther on top than an 88, but the Yamaha remained more or less the same mid-range mauler it had been since the move to a case reed in 1986. When it was on the pipe, the YZ was as fast or faster than anything else in the class, but that burst was very short and it was critical to time each shift precisely to prevent falling off the pipe. Unfortunately, however, the YZ's transmission was not up to being a willing partner in this endeavor. The transmission updates for 1989 improved the shifting feel considerably, but the Yamaha's cog box remained the most stubborn shifter of all the Japanese machines. It was nearly impossible to shift under power without backing off the throttle and feeding in a bit of clutch. This was not ideal on a 125 with a notoriously narrow power spread. Despite the tricked new forks, the Yamaha turned out to be a disappointing suspension performer in '89. The inverted KYB forks offered decent damping, but their stock springs were too soft for most riders' tastes. In stock condition, many riders ranked it behind the CR, but with stiffer springs they passed the Harshawas in the standings. Out back, the new Motocross was the exact opposite, with a stiff feel that worked well on hard hits, but jackhammered the pilot's rear on small chop. In stock condition, the YZ was completely unbalanced, and this may have played a significant role in its slightly unpredictable handling. In the end, the new YZ125 offered a lot of promise, but it was too unpolished to challenge the other Japanese contenders for the top spot in the standings. Motocross Action and Dirt Bike loved its hard-hitting motor, but the other magazines found its narrow power band and stubborn shifting too much of a handicap to overlook. With some suspension tuning and a race tech shifter, the Yamaha could be a winning package, but in stock condition, it was a step behind its Nipponese rivals in 1989. For our fifth contender, we have the 1989 KTM 125 Motocross. This year, only Dirt Bike included it in its shootout, and they ranked it 5th out of 5 in their overall standings. Today, KTM is a motocross powerhouse, but in 1989 they were largely an afterthought in the American market. They were quite successful off-road, and were well respected over in Europe, but over here the magazines rarely included them in their motocross shootouts, and often did not even bother to test them. In 1989, only Dirt Bike included the KTM in their shootout, despite the machine's reputation for advanced technology and blistering performance. All new in 1987, KTM's 125 received several improvements for 1989. A new frame pulled in the geometry slightly, changed the fork offset, and repositioned the swing arm to improve handling. Updated White Power 4054 inverted forks featured revised valving and external adjustments for compression and rebound damping. An updated Pro Lever linkage and White Power Super Adjuster shock were added and paired with a new set of Brembo calipers and a large front rotor. Motor changes for '89 included updated porting, beefed up transmission gears, a stronger clutch, and a larger float bowl for the 37mm Dell'Orto carb. On the track, the '89 KTM 125 MX was an absolute rocket. From the mid-range on up, it was the fastest 125 in the shootout and even outmuscled the blazing fast CR125. Low-end power was unimpressive, but once the KTM climbed on the pipe, it was the horsepower champ of 1989. Like the Yamaha, however, the KTM's problem was converting all of that firepower into forward thrust. Both the clutch and transmission were unrefined, with a heavy feel and an imprecise engagement. Shifting action was very notchy, and it was hard to get a positive shift under power. The clutch pull felt more suitable for an open bike, and most riders found the KTM more tiring to ride than its competition. In a flat-out drag race, the KTM was wicked fast, but once you threw in the hills, turns, and off-cambers of a motocross course, its powertrain shortcomings became more apparent. Like the motor, the KTM suspension was filled with potential, but settings KTM chose for the 125 handicapped its appeal. Both the trick inverted forks and super adjuster shock were set up too softly for dirt bike's taste. The soft springs and quick rebound damping probably worked well on the fast and smooth tracks of Europe, but they were out of step with what American testers were comfortable with at the time. On the handling front, the KTM was rather unpredictable, with excellent front-end traction on hardpack, but a vague steering feel on other surfaces. It was hard to trust the front end in sand and mud, and the KTM was known to break into Honda-like fits of headshake at speed. Bigger riders appreciated its roomy ergonomics, but its large and tall layout made the KTM feel heavier and less nimble than the Japanese 125s. In Europe, the KTM proved its mettle by taking Trampus Parker to the '89 125 World Motocross title, but over here it remained an underdog to the Japanese. Dirt Bike was impressed by its remarkable power output, but everything else about the Katoom was a tick off its rivals. It was certainly competitive with a bit of fine-tuning, but that last bit of refinement was left up to the KTM's owner to sort out. So there you have it. That's a look back at the 125 shootouts of 1989. A great year for 125s. I think, again, today, most people would say the Honda was the best bike to own. It certainly was the fastest. And things like suspension are one of those things that are pretty easy to fix these days. You could get bad forks revalved, the shock taken care of. It wasn't like a deal breaker. It's a lot of times easier to get something like that done than it is to get a slow motor, make it fast without blowing it up. I personally probably, of all the bikes I rode at the time, I like the RM the best, even though it didn't have a lot of top end. It was so snappy and fun. I love the way the power was instant, and the suspension was like so much better than the Hondas in this time. It was like night and day better. But again, you're talking like basically stock machine for stock machine. I think any of these machines with a little help could be made pretty competitive. The KX was kind of a boring machine to ride. It had like no hit, and it was probably my least favorite of these. The YZ, like I said, that's a bike I owned, and I did like it, but the power band on these bikes was very narrow. It really had a real hard hit in the mid-range, and there really wasn't anything other than that. And I always had trouble with, if you let it rev out a little bit too far, it really fell on its, like a put out a boat anchor. It was pretty rough. And the shifting was tough too. These things had really notchy shifting. I ended up putting a Race Tech shifter on mine that made it a lot better, but in stock, stock condition, you got a real narrow power band, a tough transmission, and sometimes you get stuck in a gear, you can't get it to grab the next one. I would say it's a pretty significant handicap at the time. But again, all these machines now, if you had one, I'm sure you'd have fun with it. So if you like this sort of thing, please check out some of the other videos I have. If you could share on social media, let your friends know about the channel, I would really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, comment, I would very much appreciate that as well. So until we meet again, this is Tony Blazier for the Motocross Vault. Keep the rubber side down. Peace.